Chapter 36. The room was so quiet that the only sound was the sound of two people breathing. Zheng Shuyi was wrapped in a quilt and closed her eyes for a while, but it was difficult to settle down. After a while, a slit opened her eyes, and she saw Shi Yan leaning on the sofa in a blurry corner of her vision, her shoulders half tilted, her legs stretched casually, and she looked down at her phone. It seems that I am really ready to stay here. Others just sat there, neither talking nor doing anything, but brought an inexplicable sense of security. Zheng Shuyi thought, at least he wouldn't be crying out in pain, but no one would answer. That kind of uneasiness made her dare not turn off the ringtone of her mobile phone even when she was sleeping. After watching quietly for a while, Zheng Shuyi took out his phone, turned off the mute, then turned over, with his back to him, and finally closed his eyes after a long time. Suddenly, Shi Yan's voice sounded. Do you have a stomachache, a headache, or where? Zheng Shuyi opened his eyes and said falteringly, that pain. The people behind were silent. After a while, his cold voice came again. Well, you can continue to wear short skirts to go out tomorrow, and short sleeves are also fine, so it won't hurt. Zheng Shuyi, can smelly men comfort people? You think I wear skirts for? She clutched the quilt and moaned, it's not for looking good. It looks good enough without a skirt. Zheng Shuyi blinked and looked back at him, go to sleep. Zheng Shuyi didn't expect that he could really fall asleep in such an environment. Shi Yan never expected that she would really sleep so soundly. There was no movement on the bed for a long time, only the sound of long and even breathing. The winter afternoon was long and silent, and the sky was overcast, but at 2 or 3 o'clock, there was no bright sunshine. The lights in the room were turned on a little brightly, which made it hard to stay still. Shi Yan looked up at the person on the bed, got up slowly, turned off the headlight overhead, and turned on the dim floor lamp standing beside the bed. At this time, the mobile phone on the bedside table suddenly lit up. There was no sound or vibration, and the incoming call, displayed on the screen, was Ms. Wang, the breeder. Shi Yan glanced at Zheng Shuyi, who was sleeping soundly, and ignored the call, letting it hang up by itself. But after a few seconds, the call came again, and it was still the breeder, Ms. Wang. Have pets at home. It felt like the call seemed rushed. So he stretched out his hand, and when he touched Zheng Shuyi's messy hair, his movements stopped. I wanted to brush the hair off her face and pinch her face, but seeing her sleeping soundly, Shi Yan smiled suddenly, pinched her hair, and brushed the tip of her nose. 1 click, 2 clicks, 3 clicks. Shi Yan was like teasing, repeating the action tirelessly. What are you doing? After a while, Zheng Shuyi was woken up, so impatient that she didn't bother to open her eyes. Shi Yan, call. Zheng Shuyi closed her eyes and adjusted her breathing for a while, before grabbing the phone. The moment she saw the caller ID, she twitched the corners of her lips, and then said in a prolonged voice, Mom. Time banquet. This remark is really ingenious. I'm sleeping. Zheng Shuyi rubbed her hair, but didn't sit up. From what Zheng Shuyi's mother knew about her, she was not a person who liked to sleep in the afternoon, so it felt a little strange. How do you sleep in the afternoon? But Zheng Shuyi didn't want to tell her that he wasn't feeling well, that if he was out alone, he would worry his family thousands of miles away. It's okay, I'm tired. There was silence on the phone for a few seconds. Nothing, then why don't you go to Yu? When Zheng Shuyi heard those 2 words, he sat up quickly. Seeing her sudden movement, Shi Yan also glanced sideways at her. The eyes of the two suddenly met, and 2 seconds later, Zheng Shuyi looked away with some guilt. She scratched her head. Mom, can't I rest on weekends? Going to have a meal and watch a movie together is also a break. Mom took it all for granted. Isn't it a step up recently? What kind of romance movie? I see that your cousin is posting those on Moments, so you should go watch them too. Chant. Mom, actually She raised her eyes and peeked. Shi Yan had already turned her back. It's really unnecessary, just wait, I'll tell you when I get home during the Chinese New Year. What are you talking about? Why do you suddenly want to go home for the New Year and tell me? Are you suddenly ignoring Yu again? Zheng Shuyi grabbed the pillow helplessly. No, I'm just. Mom interrupted her suddenly. If you don't like it, just tell Mom. Mom won't force you. Upon hearing this, Zheng Shuyi nodded immediately. Yes, actually, I really don't like that one. But at the same time, her mother hadn't finished her sentence. Mom will find someone for you. Zheng Shuyi. Then tell Mom, which one do you like? Zheng Shuyi looked at Shi Yan's back, and murmured, didn't I send you a photo? Beep beep. A busy tone sounded in his ear. Xing Shui held the phone in front of him and looked at it. The other party had hung up. The room fell silent for an instant. Xing Shui rubbed the phone and fell into a strange silence. She always felt that when she just answered the phone, Shi Yan was looking at her expression intentionally or unintentionally. It's as if I heard the conversation between her and my mother. But Shi Yan didn't speak at this moment, and sat quietly by the side, letting her little nervousness flow in the air. It is not difficult to guess the complete dialogue from the conversations that just fell into his ears. I really don't like that one, didn't I send you a photo? After a long time, Shi Yan saw her picking up her phone and scratching her hair. It seemed that when she was about to say something, Shi Yan suddenly spoke, directly cutting off her expected speech. Is your family urging you to go on a blind date? Xing Shui. How did he feel so accurate? No, no. Xing Shui shrank into the quilt. My mother said she would buy me a dog. Shi Yan nodded. Then which one do you like? Oh. I like those who are more obedient and obedient. Xing Shui touched his face. You know, the kind of Chinese pastoral dog. Time banquet. Inexplicably, I feel that I have been connoted. The connotation is nothing. The main thing is that she is a little girl with too many tricks, but she also shows an innocent look, which makes people feel sulky, but they can't bear to attack her. After a long time, Shi Yan looked away, digested some emotions, and said, Xing Shui, you are really a headache every day. Xing Shui smiled, pretending not to understand, blinking his eyes. Then I'll give you some painkillers. Time banquet. His eyes sank, and his tone became a little irritable. Are you still sleeping? Xing Shui immediately glanced at the time. It was 2:30. Sleep, sleep. Don't you have a meeting at 3 o'clock? Go get busy. I'm fine. Shi Yan approached with 2 steps, wanted to say something, looked at her somewhat vain face, and finally just brushed her messy hair. After Shi Yan left, Xing Shui actually didn't fall asleep. After the pain dissipated, her body was weak, and she tossed and turned on the bed, always feeling powerless. After being bored in the pillow for a while, she finally remembered. Without meal, Xing Shui turned around, and when he was about to order takeaway with his mobile phone, the hotel's doorbell rang. The waiter came in pushing the dining cart. Miss Xing, this is the meal you ordered. Xing Shui, what did I order? The waiter nodded. Isn't your room 1026? Xing Shui was stunned for a moment, and then realized, yes, it's mine, thank you. Turning around, she sent a message to Shi Yan. Xing Shui, thank you boss. Shi Yan, who is your boss? Xing Shui didn't know which muscle was wrong, so he typed 2 words, Dad. Dad, time banquet. Regardless of what the ellipsis Shi Yan meant, Xing Shui's stomach was empty, and he couldn't wait to start eating. Just after taking 2 bites, the phone rang again. Really busy business today. Xing Shui was still a little confused when he saw the incoming call. Hi, Senior Chen, long time no see. Chen Yueding smiled and said, it's been a long time. How are you doing? Very good, busy with work. This Chen Yueding is Xing Shui's college classmate and a native of the same place. Moreover, the two are in the same grade and are in the school debate team. They have a lot of contact in private, and gradually become the best friends of the opposite sex. It's just that after graduating and going their separate ways, we lost contact. But there is a relationship from the past, and it is no stranger to contact again. That's right, I'm getting married next month. Really? Xing Shui was a little shocked. So fast. It's not too soon, we've been talking for 2 years. Chen Yueding guessed that he was also busy with the wedding, so he cut the long story short. On the 4th day of the Lunar New Year, will you come? Come, of course. Chen Yueding made 2 and didn't say anything else, but it was obvious that he was hesitant to speak. Why, is there anything else? Oh, it's just that I saw a friend some time ago and found that you and Yu Xingzhou seem to have broken up. Chen Yueding was a little embarrassed. I'm not asking for anything, I just thought, he and I have a good relationship, we are all on the same page school, and then, it's okay. Xing Shui understood what he meant, and accepted his embarrassment. You invite me, what's the matter? We shouldn't interfere with you. Well, what I know is that. Chen Yueding scratched the back of his head on the computer. I called him this morning, and it seems that his incumbent is also there, saying that they are going to the wedding together. I don't know about you here. Xing Shui's fingers trembled, he gritted his teeth, and said with a smile, it's okay, I don't care. Chen Yueding heaved a sigh of relief, and nodded again and again. That's good, then contact me later. Good. After hanging up the phone, the smile on the corner of Xing Shui's mouth froze slowly, and he squeezed the chopsticks in his hand tightly. Looking at the food in front of me again, it doesn't taste good immediately. Everything you say is brave. If she attended the wedding alone on the fourth day of the Lunar New Year, and Yu Xingzhou showed up sweetly with Qin Leji, she might die of anger and blood. But here at Shiyan, well, Zheng Shui sighed. She didn't know what to do. Everything seems to have deviated from the track she expected. For example, before this phone call, when she saw and thought of Shiyan, it was exactly this person, and she never thought that this person was Qin Leji's little uncle. She felt that now, she seemed to be simply, in a relationship with Shiyan, in love. The sky is getting dark, the twilight is twilight. For a while, a woman's sigh sounded in the room, and for a while, there was the soft sound of the pillow being kneaded. Time flowed slowly, and all emotions were finally soothed by the tiredness after taking the medicine. When Shiyan came back, he passed the door of Zheng Shui's room and subconsciously stopped. He knocked on the door, but there was no answer. After waiting for a while, he swiped open the door directly. Walking outside her room, Shiyan knocked on the door again, but there was still no answer. He frowned, dialed the phone, but no one answered. At this time, there is nothing else to worry about. Shiyan pushed open the door of the room, and what came into his eyes was a messy bed and a head of black hair scattered on the pillow. His heart skipped a beat, and he didn't know what he was thinking, but he reached out to check Zheng Shui's breathing. After feeling her even breathing, Shiyan withdrew his hand and felt that he had suddenly lost his mind. He raised his hand and looked at the time. 7:30 in the evening. Can really sleep. Entered silently and exited the room silently. Except that Zheng Shui's hand was stuffed into the quilt, no other changes could be seen. But in fact, Zheng Shui is not as sleepy as Shiyan thought. 11 o'clock at night. Shiyan was about to change clothes and take a shower when he suddenly received a message from Zheng Shui. Zheng Shui, rolling.gif. Shiyan, are you awake? Zheng Shui, just woke up. Shiyan subconsciously wanted to say, go to bed so late, and when the idea popped up, he thought it was ridiculous. Shiyan, so. Zheng Shui, I can't sleep. Really? Shiyan lowered the hand that was about to unbutton his shirt. Shiyan, then what? Zheng Shui, is there anything you can do for me? Zheng Shui, for example, ask Mr. Chiu to send me some materials. Shiyan, it's so late, why are you bothering others? Zheng Shui, okay, I see. 8:86. Time banquet, change clothes. Zheng Shui, time banquet, go out. Zheng Shui, where are you going? Shiyan, take you to the movies. Zheng Shui was still a little dazed until she sat in the cinema hall. At 11:30 at night, she ran out with Shiyan to watch a movie. What's more, I didn't expect that there would be so many people in the cinema at such a late hour and in the middle of winter. There are only 3 movies to choose from at this point, except for a big movie that makes money when you listen to it, and a documentary that makes you tear up when you listen to it. Zheng Shui didn't want to doze off or shed tears, so she chose the last romantic movie, whose name sounds very literary. Especially the title, the protagonist rides a bicycle through a blue sea. The title of the film slowly appears, and a random part of the screen is the desktop. Many girls in the front row took out their mobile phones and started taking pictures. Taking advantage of the dim light, Zheng Shui glanced sideways at Shiyan. He stared at the big screen with a flickering light and shadow on his face. Sensing Zheng Shui's gaze, he turned his head to look over. The two sat side by side, and when he turned his head like this, his breathing became entangled. With the light behind him, Zheng Shui couldn't see his expression or eyes clearly, but because of this unexpected staring at each other, a certain string in his heart was shaken. After a few seconds, Zheng Shui suddenly came back to his senses, looked away, took out his mobile phone and took a picture of the opening scene that was about to disappear. The beginning of the movie was silent and boring. Only 20 minutes later, some people started to sleep, and more people started to play with their mobile phones. Zheng Shui thought that she couldn't watch this movie at all at the moment. It must be because the plot was too boring. After thinking about it, she lowered her head, turned to the photo she just took, and sent it to Moments by accident. Nothing was said. Like an emotion surging in the dark, it was frozen in the phone. It's not too late now. The comments and likes from the circle of friends came very quickly. Qin Shiriwe was the first. Qin Shiriwe, you still go to the movies with your father so late. Zheng Shui, this sister is really a king of relief. She didn't know what to say, so she replied with an ellipsis. When she acquiesced, Qin Shiriwe replied, my dad never has time for me, so envious, your dad really treats you like a baby. Zheng Shui, haha. With no emotions left, she put away her phone and concentrated on watching the movie. However, this movie is really boring. A few minutes later, Zheng Shui glanced at the phone again. The strange emotion that dissipated suddenly rose again. Among the numerous likes, she unexpectedly saw Shiryan's profile picture. He actually gave her a thumbs up. It's an amazing feeling. In the lively circle of friends, he knew what she was doing, but silently acquiesced in everything she did. Chapter 37. Shiryan's like, in addition to causing ripples in Zheng Shui's heart, also made Qin Shiyue feel confused. She received a notification message and clicked in to have a look. Uncle. She almost thought she was dazzled. In Qin Shiyue's eyes, it is not surprising that Shiryan and Zheng Shui have WeChat friends. After all, the two have cooperated before, and it is not unusual to establish a relationship. But the strange thing is that Shiryan's late-night praise does not conform to his usual logic of behavior. In fact, Qin Shiyue and Shiryan have many mutual friends, but she has never seen an active figure of Shiryan in the circle of friends. She even once thought that Shiryan created WeChat just for work. It can be said that it is for work. Some uncles usually post and write work-related information, but I have never seen her little uncle take a shot. Not to mention liking a woman's circle of friends. Or everyday photos with no information. Still in the middle of the night. The more Qin Shiyue thought about it, the more something went wrong. The desire to find out the gossip made her click on the dialogue box of Shiryan several times, eager to try. But in the end, rationality defeated the desire for gossip. Forget it, isn't it good to live? The movie is not halfway through, but the people in the cinema have already left halfway. The front row was suddenly empty. After a while, the people around Zheng Shui began to move around, some bowed their heads and whispered, some fiddled with their mobile phones, and even snoring came from behind. On the big screen, the male and female protagonists are still sitting on the beach, chatting about life. The audience may already want to pull the director out to talk about life. The airtight theater began to feel less calm, with various emotions floating in the dimness. Zheng Shui glanced at Shiryan quietly, wondering if he also felt bored, but he quietly looked at the screen. The eyebrows are stretched and the eyes are soft. It doesn't look like he is very impatient, but he doesn't seem to be very involved in the plot of the movie. Just sit there. Zheng Shui withdrew his gaze and leaned back on the chair. Unknowingly, she also glanced at Shiryan and stared at the screen, but it doesn't seem to have sunk into the plot. The film was shot for a full 120 minutes. At the end, only Zheng Shui and Shiryan were left in the theater. Oh no, there seems to be someone else. There was a sudden noise in the row behind him. Wake up, idiot, wake up, the movie is over. This is also a man who just woke up. Seeing that his companion who came with him was sleeping soundly, he slapped him on the head. The fat man who was woken up rubbed his face, saw that the movie was finally over, and couldn't help cursing. Fuck, this idiot can still come out to collect money. Who the hell did you hear that this is good? After 2 hours is it uncomfortable to sleep in the dormitory? In fact, the companion just woke up, so he didn't bother to talk to him. The two got up together, and the fat man looked at Zheng Shui and Shiryan who were sitting in the front row, and exclaimed, "Oh, this movie is so fucking good that someone can watch it from the beginning to the end. I admire it. It's amazing." The companion slapped him again and lowered his voice. "Fool, is he watching a movie?" The fat man was puzzled. "What the hell? What are you looking at?" "Companion, you deserve your mother's solo." The voices of the two gradually faded away, but their conversation lingered in Zheng Shui's ears for a long time. Shiryan next to him didn't make a sound or move. Zheng Shui didn't know if he heard it too, and he didn't know what to do. It wasn't until the end of the credits that Shiryan finally stood up. "Let's go." Zheng Shui noticed that his expression was dull, so he nodded quickly. "Let's go, it's getting late." On the way back, the two sat in the back seat of the car, and neither of them spoke. This kind of silence, obviously very quiet, made Zheng Shui feel a little uncomfortable. The specific manifestation is her palms are faintly hot, and even the temperature in the car seems to have changed significantly. If she doesn't find something to talk about, she will fall into cranky thoughts. When it was almost time to arrive at the hotel, Zheng Shui finally said dryly, "Ah, do you think it looks good?" Shiryan, "What?" Zheng Shui, "Just today's movie." Shiryan seemed to think about it for a while. "It's okay." "Oh," Zheng Shui nodded. Shiryan asked again, "What do you think?" "Me, I think it's okay too." After Jing Shui finished speaking, Shiryan's gaze was still fixed on her face, and the faint burning sensation in the palm of her hand seemed to be pulled by something, slowly spreading to her whole body. Subconsciously, she wanted to talk more to ease the inexplicable ambiguity floating in the car. It's pretty. She nodded. The scene of the heroine leaning on the arms of the hero at the end is so beautiful. The two actors really match well. It makes me believe in love again. It's so sweet. Shiryan glanced at her. That scene is the imagination of the heroine, and the heroine has passed away. Jing Shui, huh? Shiryan, the hero committed suicide. Dazed for a moment, Jing Shui blinked his eyes, and his expression changed seamlessly. Yes, that's right, but this is also a kind of happiness, isn't it? The two of them love each other until the end of their lives, and they will never change until death. Isn't that true? Love. Shiryan hooked his lips and smiled lightly. Is what you're watching a movie? Jing Shui. Until he got off the car and entered the hotel, and got on the elevator, Jing Shui was still thinking, why the hell are both the male and female protagonists dead? Isn't this a sweet romance movie? Isn't it a gimmick to redeem each other? How did he die? No wonder the audience is gone. Bah, fraud. With a ding, the floor has arrived. Shiryan looked down and saw that Jing Shui was still immersed in his spiritual world, took her hand, and walked out. The moment her fingers touched, Jing Shui quickly regained consciousness from the plot of the movie, stiffened her neck, and lowered her eyes to look at her hand, Shiryan's hand. After 2 steps, he reached the door of the room. He let go of his hand, lifted it up, and glanced at his watch. A series of movements naturally made Jing Shui feel that he was waiting for the time before letting go of her hand. It's 3 o'clock. Shiryan frowned, and was quite surprised that he actually watched a bad movie and saw it now. Good night. Oh. Jing Shui nodded, good night. But as soon as he entered the door, Jing Shui immediately took out his mobile phone and found the Douban interface of the movie. She read the synopsis and read a few long comments, and a question mark slowly popped up in her head. This is obviously the happy ending she talked about, right? Is there something wrong with the banquet? Did he really watch the movie? Jing Shui, why did you lie to me? Shiryan had just returned to the room and was still not asleep. Shiryan, what did I lie to you? Jing Shui, the ending of the movie is obviously not like that. Shiryan, yes. Shiryan, then why don't you watch movies? Jing Shui paused with his fingers. In the past, she could type out dozens of sentences like, because I'm watching you, and why are you in the mood to watch a movie when you're next to me, without changing her face. But at this moment, she still couldn't press those keys. Jing Shui, I want you to take care of it. Jing Shui, asleep. Time banquet, good night. The first day of the Cruncher Forum was spent in such chaos. The next agenda was tight and busy. Shiryan and Jing Shui met at various venues, and were occasionally invited to attend dinners. Since they are all professionals in the industry, and they sometimes have banquets by his side, sticking to his face, Jing Shui handles it like a duck to water. During this trip, in addition to receiving the most cutting-edge macro trends in the current industry, Jing Shui also made friends with many people in the industry. It can be regarded as a rewarding return, marking a successful end to this year's work. Jing Shui's magazine office has never had a holiday until the New Year's Eve, and it is customary to end work on the 28th every year, which happens to be the day of salary payment this month. Since Jing Shui published 2 high-profile articles this quarter, the bonus is very considerable. So in the afternoon of the first day of the holiday, she happily went to the shopping mall. She was going to take the high-speed train home in the evening, so of course she bought things for her parents immediately. Mom's gift is a good choice, a cashmere scarf, and a pair of gold earrings. She is not interested in other things. As for Dad, Jing Shui wandered around the mall for a long time but didn't know what to do. Buy clothes or shoes, they may not fit well, and it will be very troublesome to return them when the time comes. Walking to the first floor and seeing a watch shop, she finally had an idea. As soon as Jing Shui entered the door, the shopping guide greeted him. Is there a beauty contestant? Jing Shui nodded while looking around. Shopping guide, will you wear it yourself or give it away? Jing Shui, give it away. While guiding her to the new counter, the shopping guide said, is it for men or women? How old is it? Male. Jing Shui looked down at the display cabinet, maybe in his early 50s. The shopping guide quickly recommended one, and Jing Shui also liked it, but the price was a little expensive, 20,000 yuan less. But it's acceptable. Jing Shui asked for this one, glanced at it casually, and saw a lady's quartz watch. Her gaze only stayed for 2 seconds longer, and the shopping guide immediately took it out for her to see. At first, she didn't think there was anything wrong with it, but the shopping guide personally put it on her wrist. The shiny white skin and the crystal dial complemented each other, and Zheng Shui suddenly felt that the watch was on her hand. After hesitating for a moment, the shopping guide immediately started lobbying. Zheng Shui's only concern is that this watch is in the early 20,000, if she buys all of them, her bonus will be almost half. Thinking about it still hurts a little. Just as he was hesitating, a voice behind him was getting closer. Look at the watch, I don't buy it, I don't like wearing watches, I'll buy it for Xingzhou, I think he likes this watch. Zheng Shui suddenly breathed a sigh of relief, and there was only one thought in his mind: he would never come to this poor shopping mall again next time. He actually met Qin Leji again. Before she could turn around, Qin Leji saw Zheng Shui's back and recognized him at a glance. She walked in with a friend, and when she passed by Zheng Shui, she glanced at her and said nothing. The shopping guide who knows nothing is still trying to sell goods. This watch is really suitable for you. Although the price is a bit expensive, you also know that you get what you pay for. The shopping guide Balabala said a lot, but Zheng Shui didn't listen carefully, only noticed that Qin Leji glanced here. They just looked at each other, and the invisible smell of gunpowder came out. Okay. Zheng Shui took off his watch. I want these too. The shopping guide was in full bloom, and while going to get the box, he said, your one-time consumption here is over 40,000, you can register as a senior member, and we will give you points. Qin Leji didn't respond, but her friend gave a tisk and murmured to herself, why is the whole world full of rich people, but I'm the only poor person? It happened that Zheng Shui followed the shopping guide and passed by them. Qin Leji glanced sideways and chuckled, you can find a rich boyfriend as well. She didn't say what she said later, it's just that she's a bit older, and she still has a wife and children, it depends on whether you can accept it. The friend answered, come on, I have self-knowledge, even rich people don't like me. Zheng Shui heard her voice that was not deliberately lowered, and didn't want to pay attention, because a new message came in on her mobile phone. It's a time banquet. Sure Yan, when do you leave today? Zheng Shui walked towards the cashier while typing. Zheng Shui, the high-speed rail ticket at 7 o'clock. Sure Yan, yes. Sure Yan, shall I see you off? When receiving this news, Qin Leji was in a strange mood. It's different after climbing a high branch. I have more confidence when I swipe my card. Zheng Shui gritted her teeth, and replied okay, I'll wait for you to Sure Yan. After returning, the shopping guide just finished swiping the card and returned it to her. She stuffed the card into her bag and said unhurriedly, my boyfriend is rich, what's wrong? Qin Leji just looked down at his watch, smiled and didn't respond. It wasn't until Zheng Shui passed by her that he said, not only are you rich, but when you meet my boyfriend later, you have to be respectful, right? Her face changed, and she didn't know whether to continue to sneer or not. After a while, when Yu Xingzhou came to pick Qin Leji up for dinner, she couldn't help complaining about it. Your ex-girlfriend can really do it. When Zheng Shui was mentioned suddenly, Yu Xingzhou frowned. What happened again? Qin Leji pretended to pick the dishes in the bowl casually. It's nothing, I just found a rich boyfriend, so I have the confidence to go out and spend money. Yu Xingzhou quickly put down his chopsticks. You must have misunderstood, she has nothing to do with the CFO of your company. Oh, you trust her so much. Qin Leji finished speaking coldly, and suddenly thought of something. His expression changed. Or are you in contact with her again? This is the red line for Yu Xingzhou and Qin Leji. The last time Qin Leji found out that he had texted Zheng Shui, he was so angry that he quarreled with him for 2 days. So he didn't want Qin Leji to know that he had met Zheng Shui, otherwise there would be trouble for 3 days and 3 nights. No. Yu Xingzhou said, I guess. Qin Leji expected that he would not look for Zheng Shui in a stern manner, and sneered twice. I actually reminded her, if Mr. Chiu's wife finds out about this, she must not take off her 3 layers of skin. Yu Xingzhou was tired of hearing it, and couldn't explain it directly, so he could only say intentionally or unintentionally, if you don't like it so much, then just tell your little uncle that you don't like it. As soon as the words fell, Qin Leji's eyes flickered, but his hands tightly held the chopsticks. She immediately lowered her head to pick up the vegetables, to hide her slight panic. How can these things bother him? Let's eat, I'm going to starve to death. Every time Qin Leji or Yu Xingzhou appeared, they could swallow all Zheng Shui's good mood in an instant. She pulled the suitcase and stood at the gate of the community with her head down, unable to lift her spirits. When Shiryan's car arrived, it was a few minutes later than the agreed time. When he didn't come down, the driver came over to help Xing Shui put his luggage. Xing Shui was also familiar with the driver, so she was not so polite, said thank you and got into the car straight away. Shiryan was sitting on the left side of the car, holding a financial statement in his hand, and when he saw Xing Shui coming up, he rolled his eyes. She was obviously not in a good mood. She sat up and didn't say a word, just leaned in the corner, picking her nails for a while, and fiddling with her clothes for a while. After looking at her for a while, seeing that she didn't intend to speak, Shiryan put down the thing in his hand and rubbed the space between his brows. Traffic jam. Listening to him, Zh. Xing Shui glanced up. The reflex arc reacted very slowly. He was explaining why he was a few minutes late. Oh. Xing Shui said sullenly, it's okay. Probably because of what happened in the mall today. She felt very uncomfortable seeing Shiryan now. The feeling was indescribable, like soaking in hot water for several hours. My chest was sore and swollen, and I couldn't breathe smoothly. The silence continued until the high-speed rail station. When parking, the driver goes down first to carry the luggage. Xing Shui slowly unfastened his seat belt, and when he opened the car door, his movements were slow, and he looked at Shiryan. Just in time, Shiryan also looked over. Bad mood. Xing Shui was silent, lowered his eyes, and said, oh, it's not because I think I won't be able to see you for a few days, so I'm a little unhappy. Her tone was flat, almost emotionless. Shiryan looked at her deeply, and his thoughts also made several detours in his heart. Finally, he sighed silently. Does every family have to visit relatives during the Chinese New Year? Huh. Xing Shui thought for a while. It's okay, my family has few relatives, and I only need to go to New Year's greetings from the 1st to 3rd grades of junior high school. Shiryan nodded. Understood, let's get in.
Welcome to Storyverse. If you have any novels you'd like to see or stories you'd like to share, feel free to leave us a comment or send us a private message. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button to join our community of avid readers and romance enthusiasts.
Chapter 38. Although it is a holiday, the Spring Festival is also one of the busiest days of the year. Since arriving home on the night of the 28th day of the new year, Xing Shui has hardly had a rest. She was dragged by her parents to do the house cleaning, buy New Year's goods, and even took a day to visit relatives. In the evening, my father was busy with the New Year's Eve dinner in the kitchen. There was a TV in the living room, and the warm-up program for the Spring Festival Gala was broadcast in full swing. Ms. Wang was sitting on the sofa, eating melon seeds, and glanced at Xing Shui, who was fiddling with her mobile phone from time to time. I look at my phone every day, and sooner or later I will get into it. Xing Shui snorted, sent New Year greetings to the leader. Then you're quite considerate. Wang Meru said intentionally or unintentionally. Then, have you sent New Year greetings to Yu? Sent it. I wish him good luck in the new year, prosperity, success in work and good health. How about it, is it sincere enough? I typed it word by word. Wang Meru obviously knew that she was perfunctory. Why don't you invite him to dinner and bless him face to face? I think it's more sincere. Just as Xing Shui was about to refute, he suddenly glanced at his phone, and immediately got up and ran to the room. What are you doing? It's time to eat. I know. After a while, Xing Shui came out of the room while pinching the time to eat. The two at the dinner table were still chatting about Yu. He is busy with work, and he was in a hurry to get home today. Young people work really hard now. Let people rest for 2 more days, and bring the girls to have a reunion dinner together later. I don't go. Xing Shui suddenly appeared at the dinner table, served the rice bowl contentedly, with a smile on the corner of his mouth. Don't match up, I won't call him, and... Xing Shui picked out the rice in the bowl, and said slowly, I have arrangements for my feelings. Wang Meru snorted, full of disapproval. I said so. I didn't see you really arranged anything. Xing Shui buried her head in her meal and didn't speak, but the corners of her mouth were slightly raised. After a while, he muttered, I'll scare you to death when I see you later. At the beginning, her parents really didn't take her words seriously until the night of the 3rd day of junior high school. Why do you sneak out and make a phone call at this point every day? Wang Meru tugged at Xing Su's sleeve. Is there something wrong? For the past 3 days, their family went to different relatives' homes every night to pay New Year's greetings. However, every 6 or 7 o'clock, Xing Shui began to stare at the phone absently. After a while, He went out holding the phone and came back after a while. Holding the teacup in his hand, Jingsu glanced at the balcony. Take a look. On the open-air balcony, Jingshui leaned against the fence, her hair messed up by the wind, but her toes kept grinding the ground. We're going to the wedding tomorrow. The senior of my university. It's senior. Why, no one called you senior when you were in school. Behind the door, Jingshui's parents looked at each other with a hint of disgust in their eyes. How can you be so pretentious when you make a phone call? That is. However, as soon as the phone was hung up, Jingshui's eyebrows fell down. Speaking of tomorrow's wedding, Jingshui pulled off a leaf of the green plant and rubbed it in his hand. It is impossible not to go. If you want to go, you must be gorgeous. Pressure Qin. Happy of. Jingshui's ability to act in this area has always been amazing. The next morning, he got up early in the morning to take a shower, wash his hair, apply a mask, and sat in front of the dressing table for 2 full hours. Wang Meru pushed open the door for the 3rd time, seeing that she was still fiddling with her hair. She couldn't help asking, "Are you the bride?" Jingshui fiddled with the curls at the end of her hair, and said in a low voice, "Leave me alone." Since she can only attend today's wedding by herself, she must show an aura that does not lose to the two of them. According to Jingshui's experience in attending weddings, the host usually divides the guests into tables according to their relationship, and the university circle naturally arranges them at the same table. But Chen Yueting obviously had special consideration for Jingshui, and arranged her to be at the table of his relatives, and also ordered his cousins to entertain the guests well. However, the sky was not as expected. As soon as Jingshui arrived, a few familiar people at the table at the university saw her. Everyone didn't know the situation, so they naturally felt that Jingshui was going to sit at the same table with them, so they greeted them warmly, which made it difficult for her and Chen Yueting to deal with. Anyway, it was a classmate's wedding, and Jingshui didn't want to cause any trouble, so she had to sit down. Although the students sitting at this table were all students from the University of Finance and Economics, most of them were nodding acquaintances, and they were not familiar with Jingshui. As soon as she sat down, everyone chatted in a hurry, asking about work for a while, and talking about life for a while. I thought this was the end of the topic, but suddenly a girl remembered the past and said, I remember your boyfriend is a student of our major, right? You have a good relationship with Chen Yueting, didn't you guys come together? When she said this, everyone remembered that there was such a thing. We broke up. Jingshui said lightly, I don't know if he will come today or not, and it doesn't matter. As soon as the words fell, the girl next to Jingshui glanced at the entrance, and the movement of eating melon seeds suddenly stopped. A table of people, including Jingshui, looked towards the entrance. Under the arched door wrapped in flowers, the bride and groom were welcoming the guests. Yu Xingzhou attended in formal attire, talking to Chen Yueting with a smile, and Qin Leji, who was holding his arm, also shook hands with Chen Yueting, and then glanced inside, precisely locked on Jingshui. As soon as the two of them appeared, everyone at the table understood what was going on without the need for explanations. The table that was still chatting in full swing just now got stuck. However, the people at this table did not have a particularly good relationship with Jingshui or Yu Xingzhou, and there was no reason to favor anyone, so they naturally changed the topic. It's just that now that they know this, the atmosphere will inevitably become stiff. Yu Xingzhou only noticed that Jingshui was there when he brought Qin Leji over. He thought she wouldn't come, or in other words, even if he came, he would avoid meeting him. But, when his complexion was subtle, Qin Leji sat down generously and nodded to the people on the table. Turning his head again, he looked at Jingshui squarely. And Jingshui was leaning on the chair, playing with the phone expressionlessly. The students who originally wanted to chat with Yu Xingzhou about the recent situation didn't talk to him to avoid embarrassment. Everyone at the table was chatting, only these 3 people were silent, as if in another dimension. The atmosphere became more and more strange. Fortunately, they didn't come too early, and soon the wedding officially started. Everyone's attention was attracted by the bride and groom on stage, and there was a legitimate reason to ease the embarrassment. After a series of procedures, the master of ceremonies worked hard to mobilize the atmosphere of the scene, and the guests either applauded or booed, and it was extremely lively for a while. Finally, under the arrangement of the master of ceremonies, the bride raised her bouquet high with her back to the guest seats. The single men and women below all stood up, gearing up for a moment of joy. Following the uproar at the scene, the bouquet drew a parabola in the air, and under the eyes of everyone, it landed firmly in Jingshui's hands. Suddenly something fell from the sky. Xing Shui was also stunned for a moment, holding a bouquet of flowers, a little at a loss amidst the din of voices. Congratulations to this lucky one. The master of ceremonies was very responsible, walked over in 2 or 3 steps, and shouted happily at Xing Shui, "Come on, pass the microphone to this beauty." Another microphone was stuffed in his hand. Xing Shui stood up in a daze, a little at a loss for the brilliant eyes of the supervisor. Does this beauty have a boyfriend? It was originally a question in the process, but the person who was asked was Xing Shui. Yu Xingzhou thought of something, and immediately looked up at Xing Shui. The same is true for Qin Leji, although she thinks differently from Yu Xingzhou. Seeing such a situation, the students at a table smelled something strange again, and became quieter for a while. Xing Shui lifted her chin and said with a smile, "I do." Even though she hasn't seen a male creature in 10 years, she still wants to say that she has a boyfriend. But Yu Xingzhou's expression changed. Similarly, Qin Leji slightly pulled the corner of his mouth. This bouquet is really God's will. The beautiful woman and your boyfriend must have a good relationship. The master of ceremonies said a lot of good things again, and Xing Shui sat down slowly holding the bouquet. The dinner was quiet again. Xing Shui glanced at the 2 people opposite, and took a picture of the bouquet with a mobile phone while smiling in front of them, then sent it to Shiyan. She didn't say anything, just sent such a photo. Soon, Shiyan replied, "Is the wedding fun?" Xing Shui typed with a smile on his face, "It's not fun. Time banquet." Xing Shui, "I am very upset and unhappy when I meet someone I hate." Xing Shui, scratching his head. GIF. After sending this message, just as the bride and groom came to toast, Xing Shui put down his phone, picked up his glass and stood up. After a sip of juice, the guests can help themselves. Sitting opposite Xing Shui, Qin Leji asked Yu Xingzhou to fill her with soup for a while, and then asked him to peel the shrimps, making the whole table go numb. In this case, maybe the man can't feel Xiao Jiujiu, but the sensitive woman can get Qin Leji's deliberation. Probably out of sympathy, some people couldn't see her deliberately showing affection, and deliberately asked Xing Shui openly, "Hey, Shui, when do you plan to get married?" As soon as the words fell, Yu Xingzhou's sensitive nerves were seized, his hand that peeled the shrimp stopped, his eyes flickered, and he paid attention to the answer on the other side. Xing Shui was suddenly cued to this problem, and he didn't have a good way to deal with it, so he could only smile dryly and say, "I haven't considered this problem yet. It should be soon." The girl said again, "Your boyfriend is not with you this time. Is he a foreigner?" Xing Shui lowered his eyes and nodded. Yu Xingzhou was in a daze. He should have put the shrimp into Qin Leji's bowl, but instead he threw it into the drag's tray. Qin Leji gave him a cold look. "What does your boyfriend do? Is he also in our line of business?" Xing Shui let out a "hmm." "It's great, colleagues have a common language, and they can help you at work." "Hey, are you also a reporter?" "No." Xing Shui said softly. "Ah, that's from the financial circle, right? It's good. The men in the financial circle are all highly educated and have good conditions." The girl wanted to help Xing Shui find a place, so she said that on purpose. How could Qin Leji not understand what she meant? He held his breath for a long time and finally said in a cold voice at this moment, "Yes, I know him. Not only is he highly educated, but he is also excellent in all aspects." As soon as the words fell, everyone who pretended not to eat melons all looked at Qin Leji. What is this scene? Even Yu Xingzhou was dumbfounded. Qin Leji stirred the soup spoon, and said flatly, "Graduated from a famous overseas school, with a bachelor's degree and a master's degree, he is an executive of a listed company. His annual salary is frighteningly high, and he is also a good-looking talent. He has almost no shortcomings." Every time she said a word, Xing Shui's face became darker. Up to this moment, Xing Shui had guessed what she was going to say. When she looked up, she shrugged her shoulders and said word by word, "It's just that she is a little older and has a family." Silence. There was a deathly silence. The people who originally supported Xing Shui stopped talking. After all, in this kind of thing, human nature tends to believe in the worst side, and will not imagine a reversal under the circumstances of others. It was Yu Xingzhou who broke the silence first. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Qin Leji didn't refute, just smiled, "Just treat me as nonsense." And Xing Shui was not as angry as Qin Leji imagined, but slowly raised his eyes, meeting her gaze impartially. "You can eat food indiscriminately, but you can't talk indiscriminately." Qin Lizhi smiled and nodded. I understand this truth better than you. Really? Xing Shui clenched his fists tightly, but smiled. You really know better than me about destroying other people's relationships and meddling in feelings. I haven't learned it yet. Having said that, no one understands the relationship between them. It turns out Yu Xingzhou cheated and broke up. At one point, the atmosphere was so tense that it was suffocating. The people around seemed to bury their heads in their meals in silence, but in fact they were so embarrassed that their toes were about to pick out an exquisite ancient city on the ground. Xing Shui is still staring at Qin Lizhi, and no one backs down. The competition of eyes alone is already tense. Okay, Yu Xingzhou interrupted Qin Lizhi, stop talking. At this moment, Xing Shui's cell phone on the table rang. A call from Shi Yan. Xing Shui's thoughts flickered suddenly, his heart beat violently for no reason, and then he picked it up stiffly. He heard a familiar voice on the phone. Don't stay if you're not happy. Come down, I'm downstairs. Xing Shui's hands froze, but his pupils suddenly tightened. In just a few seconds, various emotions climbed in my heart like vines, intertwined into a dense web. After a while, Xing Shui stood up suddenly, his expression no longer as calm as before. I left beforehand, you can eat whatever you want. Someone wanted to call her back, but didn't know what to say. Hey, this, is Xing Shui crying. Students for so many years, what are you doing? Let's go out and have a look. Xing Shui didn't know why, but couldn't control the speed of his walking, and couldn't help but walk 2 or 3 steps underground while stepping on high heels. She walked in a hurry, sweating profusely in just a few minutes, but she walked faster and faster, until the door of the hotel was pushed open and Shi Yan was standing by the fountain. Being alone, Xing Shui suddenly felt at ease. But this kind of peace of mind weighed heavily on Xing Shui's heart like a stone. This stone named Anqin contains more complex emotions. For a moment, Xing Shui's heart clenched together. Thoughts that violated his original intention exploded in his chest. Why is it you? Why are you the one who rushed over after all the wind and rain? She stood there, although she didn't make a sound, but her face was full of grievances. Shi Yan didn't know that there was a battle between heaven and man in her heart, raised her eyebrows, stepped forward in 2 steps, and stretched out her hand towards her on the steps. Xing Shui looked at that hand, his fingertips were trembling slightly, and before he had time to think, he held it tightly. Then, she frowned, and climbed up with the other hand. Shi Yan glanced at her, didn't say anything, let her hold his arm, and led her to the parking place. The driver quickly got out of the car and opened the door for them. After getting into the car, Xing Shui still didn't say a word, but kept holding his hand tightly. Shi Yan looked her up and down, and said with a half-smile, if you attend a wedding, you can be bullied by others. It's a waste of age. Xing Shui. She raised her head, frowned, and stared at Shi Yan. What are you staring at me for? Shi Yan tilted his head, raised his hand to stroke her hair, and said softly, is it me who bullied you? Xing Shui was about to speak, and swallowed the words several times in his throat, but finally said nothing. It's just that when she turned her head slowly, she found that there were many people standing in front of the hotel. Yu Xingzhou, Qin Lizhi, Qin Yueding, and 2 or 3 people at the same table. They stood there with different expressions. It was obvious that they had been out for a while, and they had seen all the scene just now. Shi Yan looked over with Xing Shui's gaze, and it was Yu Xingzhou who caught his eyes. He frowned and his eyes sank. But Xing Shui, beside him, has already lowered the car window, looking straight at Qin Lizhi. She exhaled, put away her aggrieved look, stretched out her hand with a sneer, and hooked her fingers. What are you looking at? Why don't you come over to say hello when you see an elder? Shi Yan glanced at Xing Shui lightly. On the other side, Qin Lizhi's mind was buzzing like falling into an ice cellar. How could she be with Mr. Shi? Qin Lizhi's eyes wandered, and he didn't dare to look at Shi Yan. But her eyes fell to the front row again, and the driver in the driver's seat looked at her in surprise. Elder, when did Xing Shui know about her relationship with the driver? Qin Lizhi glanced at the driver, saw Xing Shui's arrogant expression, and finally understood. It turned out that she was waiting here. Knowing that she is the niece of Shi Yan's driver, he waited to humiliate her superiorly. But Qin Lizhi glanced over at Shi Yan, and seeing his oppressive eyes, his back shivered. The feet seemed to be filled with lead, but they still walked over step by step. She dared not pass. After she walked a few steps, Yu Xingzhou, who hadn't realized the situation, suddenly came back to his senses, and immediately followed. However, with a distance of about 10 meters, Qin Leji stood still in front of the car. His expression couldn't hold back anymore, but he still couldn't speak. Until the driver poked his head out and asked in a daze, Lele, why are you here? Qin Li's face was earthy. Little uncle, I'm here to attend the wedding. Zheng Shui, with a domineering face. The expression on her face was changing drastically at a speed visible to the naked eye. She was stunned, unable to recover for a long time, turned her neck inch by inch, looked at the driver, and tried to use all the capacity of her brain to sort out this relationship. After half a second, my day, who's the little uncle? The driver is your little uncle. At the same time, Yu Xingzhou, who was catching up, happened to hear Qin Leji's little uncle. His other leg froze even before he confiscated it. Uncle, he looked at Qin Leji and the driver in a daze, then mechanically turned his head to look at Zheng Shui, recalling what she said that day. After a while, Yu Xingzhou asked with a questioning face, little aunt. Zheng Shui's pupils trembled, he didn't raise his breath, and almost suffocated on the spot. Who is your little aunt? Don't fucking yell at people. She kicked her leg like a spring, and her whole body jumped into the car seat, grabbing someone's hand like grabbing a life-saving straw. Next second, Zheng Shui turned her head in a daze, and met Shang Shiyan's eyes. Her brain seemed to be hit by a heavy object, and it exploded with a bang. Aren't you her little uncle? How did you become your driver? Seeing Zheng Shui's dull gaze, Shiyan was very puzzled and raised his eyes. Who are these people? Zheng Shui didn't even blink his eyes. I also want to ask, who are you? Aren't you her little uncle? What have I been doing these past few months? When Zheng Shui was fighting with question marks in his head, Shiyan glanced around. His eyes swept across the people with different expressions, and finally fell on Zheng Shui. There was no color on her face. Shiyan felt that her hand was cold, so he squeezed it soothingly with a little force. Zheng Shui pulled his hand away like a spring with good elasticity. Looking at Shiyan, his breathing stagnates. It's time to play ball. Chapter 39. With this car as the center, within a radius of 1 meter, in broad daylight, an invisible vacuum glass cover suddenly descended from the sky. With a bang, the inside and outside become two worlds. The sky outside the glass cover is clear, but the air inside has been drained. The people in the glass cover, except for Shiyan, all had their breathing rhythm disrupted by the sudden meeting. The driver looked at Qin Leji looked at Zheng Shui looked at Shiyan, and Yu Xingzhou didn't even know who he should look at. A sense of suffocation came to my face. Probably only Shiyan can breathe smoothly and think normally. Because of this, when Zheng Shui found out that Shiyan wanted to investigate the situation at the moment, her scalp went numb, and a thought popped into her mind, it's over. I have to confess my life here. But she opened her mouth, but her throat seemed to be choked, and she couldn't say anything. The breath of death emanating from this small space is so obvious that Chen Yueting can see it. As the host, he didn't understand what was happening at this moment, but he couldn't stand by and watch. When he just came out, he heard his old classmate say something about Zheng Shui and Qin Leji, and he just felt a headache. Now seeing several people gathered together again, he had no choice but to step forward to ease the situation. Through the car window, Chen Yueting said, Shui, that. I'm sorry today, I didn't take good care of my side, I couldn't arrange it well, I'm really sorry, Zheng Shui's thoughts were finally pulled back by Chen Yueting's voice. His eyes were still dazed, and it took him a while to find his focus. No, it's okay, I should apologize, I had trouble at your wedding. Shiyan looked past Zheng Shui, wandered silently between the two, and then landed on the group of onlookers behind Chen Yueting. There was such an incident at the wedding, some curious people came out to watch the fun, and naturally, there were insiders who acted as commentators. I don't know. It seems that the girl in the yellow dress said that the girl in the car got involved in someone else's marriage and became a mistress for some executive. She was so angry that she left on the spot. Is that the man in the car? That's definitely not the case. How is it possible for someone so young? What's going on now? It's not a mess, I guess someone's real boyfriend showed up and made an oolong, and now I'm embarrassed. Oh, so how does this end? If I were to do this kind of thing, I would tear those people's mouths apart. Those who eat melons think that maybe someone in the know can come and add a few words if they hear it, so they don't shy away from it, and their voices are not too loud. Shiyan heard about it. At the moment, Zheng Shui was still talking to Chen Yueting. Chen Yu poked his head into the car window, frowned, and said in a low voice, I really didn't expect that she would pour dirty water on you in front of you. I don't know her well, so I'm really sorry. I'll definitely give it to you later. Apologize. When it was over, he took another look at Shiyan and gave him a sorry look. Ah, no need. Zheng Shui waved his hands again and again. As the groom, Qin Yueding was actually the victim today. How could Zheng Shui make him apologize? It's just a misunderstanding, and it wasn't caused by you, forget it. But just as she finished speaking, there was a voice without warmth behind her. Never mind. Shiyan raised his hand, walked around Zheng Shui's back, put it on the seat, and looked sideways at Qin Leji outside the window. I poured dirty water on my people, so forget it, did you ask me? His words have different effects on different people. For example, when Qin Leji and the driver heard this, their backs instantly felt cold. But Zheng Shui straightened his back when he heard it. Brother, big brother, don't talk, if you don't know anything, don't get involved. Qin Leji's heart raised his throat, and in the bitter cold wind, a fine layer of sweat appeared on his forehead. Shiyan may not know her, but she knows very well who this is in front of her. Mr. Shi. As Qin Leji's elder, although the driver didn't know exactly what happened, seeing this scene, he naturally wanted to speak for his niece. But he hadn't had time to say anything to relieve the siege. Seeing Shiyan's eyes, he didn't dare to say anything, he could only keep winking at Qin Leji. Qin Leji's face turned green for a while, then paled for a while, and turned to look at Yu Xingzhou, eager to get support from him. But Yu Xingzhou had a very weird expression, staring straight at Zheng Shui and Shiyan, with various complex emotions colliding in his eyes. No one can help her. Qin Leji held back for a while, and finally spit out a few words. Mr. Shi, it's actually because. Shiyan interrupted her, I didn't ask you to explain. He really didn't know exactly what happened. All he knew was that Zheng Shui, who dared to act recklessly in front of him, was being bullied here. The attitude of I don't want to know the process and the truth, so I want you to bow your head and apologize forcefully pressed on Qin Leji's head. After a long time, she tightened her sleeves, faced Zheng Shui, gritted her teeth and said, yes, I'm sorry. Shiyan raised his chin, that's it. Qin Leji's heart slumped, and he bowed like a broken waist. Miss Zheng, I'm really sorry, I didn't understand the situation and talked nonsense, I was confused. Please don't remember villains, but forgive my recklessness. Zheng Shui, no, it's not you who are reckless, it's me. She wanted to cry but had no tears, but now her condition was slowly returning, and she had to pretend to be in front of Shiyan no matter what. So he put on a look of relief, smiled coldly, and waved his hand stiffly at her. All right, I don't care about you anymore. After she finished speaking, Shiyan slowly withdrew his gaze from Qin Leji. But Zheng Shui didn't feel comfortable because of Qin Leji's apology at the moment. On the contrary, even more disturbed, she glanced around and analyzed her current situation. There is a real little uncle in front and a fake little uncle on the side. Immediately felt that the cushion under the buttocks was hot. Therefore, Zheng Shui stretched out his hand quietly, groping towards the car door little by little, tentatively trying to open the door. But before he touched the handle, Shiyan suddenly said, let's go. The driver started the car immediately, did not show mercy to the current person. There was no room for Zheng Shui. At the moment when the feeling of pushing back from inertia struck, Zheng Shui straightened his back suddenly, and the corners of his mouth froze. The farce dissipated, leaving behind a chicken feather. The good days in Qin Yueding's life were messed up like this. He glared at Qin Lei, but got angry at Yu Xingzhou. Look what you did to me. Do I owe you? After finishing speaking, he didn't give the two of them a chance to apologize, and went back to the hotel directly. The other onlookers saw a joke, and the voices of pointing and pointing were endless. There were even a few students who had always defended Zheng Shui, directly accused Sang and scolded Huai. Some people really think that everyone else is like her after doing shameful things. The invitation letter says that if you bring your family members to attend, you have to be a complete person. How can someone come with a mouth and no brains? Let's go, the food is going to be cold, do you still want to eat? In such a situation, Yu Xingzhou and Qin Leji didn't have the courage to go back to the banquet anyway. The cold wind blows off a few leaves, swirling in the air and slowly falling down. Qin Leji glanced at the sky, feeling that even the leaves were laughing at her embarrassment. The two stood on the empty fountain square, like two sculptures, neither of them moved. After a long time, Yu Xingzhou was relieved and asked, what's going on? What's going on? It's not that I made a mistake. Qin Leji turned his back to him and said with a stiff neck, I saw her come to our company, and Mr. Chiu was so protective of her. Of course I thought. I'm not asking you that. Yu Xingzhou interrupted her suddenly, what's the matter with your little uncle? His words, like a sharp knife, cut off the last tight nerve of Qin Leji. She stood motionless, but no one knew that the spirit inside was slackening, and those not-so-good memories came to her mind uncontrollably. Ever since he was with Yu Xingzhou, the sense of security was like a beam of light in the sky. He could see it when he looked up, but he couldn't touch it. Because she knew in her heart that the reason why Yu Xingzhou chose to be with her was partly sincere and partly material. She understands all this, but she chooses the path herself. She even comforted herself many late nights. People have feelings. Even if Yu Xingzhou is with her for money, he will have more sincerity when he walks behind. Her family is indeed very wealthy. Her father owns a small auto parts factory. Although it is not a big enterprise, it can still tie Yu Xingzhou down. But it didn't take long for her to discover that Yu Xingzhou's appetite was much bigger than she imagined. She went to the hospital in a sudden illness late at night, and could only contact her little uncle for a while. In this way, Yu Xingzhou seemed to think that her little uncle was the owner of the Rolls-Royce. Because during this period of time, he always mentioned this matter intentionally or unintentionally, as if implying something to Qin Leji. Qin Leji is not stupid, and immediately figured out what he meant. Although she felt uncomfortable, she wanted to maintain this relationship carefully, and didn't have the courage to deny it, so she could only do Tai Chi vaguely every time. So far, no one can pretend anymore. What's wrong with my little uncle? Qin Leji turned to look up at him with red eyes. What does my little uncle have to do with you? You. Yu Xingzhou was stunned, and looked at Qin Leji in disbelief. You for a long time, but couldn't say anything. What me? Did I ever tell you who my little uncle is? At this moment, all Qin Leji's emotions that had been squeezed during this period found an outlet, and she was humiliated in public just now, so she burst into tears. It's all your own imagination. Blame me now. You're not a man. Yu Xingzhou opened his mouth halfway, and the tall man of 1.8 meters felt a precarious sense of emptiness in the daylight. Yu Xingzhou was not the only one who was on the verge of collapse. The car windows hadn't been closed since leaving the hotel. Gusts of cold wind blew in, blowing on Jing Shuyi's face like a knife. At this moment, she really hoped that the sky would drop a few knives and stab her to death. Do you feel warm? Shi Yan finally spoke. Ah, Jing Shuyi touched his face. It was really hot. No, it's not cold. Shi Yan glanced at her, and didn't mention the matter of the window again. What happened today? Can you explain? Excuse me, explain what? Jing Shuyi's nerves were tense, almost relying on her survival instinct to support her rationale. Oh, tell them, it's nothing serious, just that woman spoke ill of me at the banquet. Oh. Shi Yan nodded his chin lightly, not particularly interested in this question. He lowered his head and stared at Jing Shuyi. Whose little aunt are you going to be? Jing Shuyi shuddered. Her heart was beating wildly, but her brain was almost shutting down. She gave the driver in the front seat a stiff look. Ha, I'm so young, what kind of little aunt should I be? And he recognized the wrong person. Shi Yan chuckled lightly, with disbelief all over his face. She recognized the ex-girlfriend as the little aunt, thanks to her making it up. Specifically, he didn't want to ask. He didn't want to know about her flirting with her ex-boyfriend. But Jing Shuyi didn't know about Shi Yan's mental activities. She was afraid that if he continued to question her, she wouldn't be able to make up her mind, so she hurriedly changed the topic. By the way, why did you come here suddenly? Hearing this, Shi Yan glanced at her flushed face, raised his hand to loosen the tie, looked away, looked ahead, and said casually, come and see the stars. Jing Shuyi froze for a moment, seeing himself reflected in Shi Yan's pupils. His heart jumped again. Look at the stars. She remembered that she once said I miss you on WeChat, and a screen full of stars appeared. No, Jing Shuyi almost lost his ability to think, and said dryly, the air here is not very good, it seems that we can't see the stars. Shi Yan frowned, and looked sideways again. Jing Shuyi swallowed nervously. Just at this moment, the phone rang suddenly. Like catching a life-saving straw in the ups and downs of the tide, Jing Shuyi answered the call without even looking at who it was. Hello, Sister Shuyi, are you home? Qin Shiyue's voice sounded from the other end of the phone. I just arrived at your house, are you free? Come take a hot spring. Without even thinking about it, Xing Shui said, "Oh, yes, yes, yes." Now she urgently needs to break away from the current Shura field environment to think about life alone. When her brain couldn't function normally and came up with a countermeasure, fortunately Qin Shiwei came, and Xing Shui didn't care what happened, just grabbed this life-saving straw that could temporarily pull her out of the fire pit.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to our channel for more captivating illustrated romance audiobooks. Don't miss out on our latest releases and be part of our growing community. Hit that subscribe button and embark on an enchanting journey with us.